Okay, the next essay is of the what? The public sector. And then it says discuss the objectives of the public sector, right? Okay, so in your introduction, you need to define the what? The public sector, right? So there are two parts. The first part says the state, which is our public sector, is a body that governs and regulates the functioning of its economy, right? That's the first part. It is a body that governs and regulates the functioning of its economy. And this is the second part, also plays a paternal role in providing its economy with its basic and important needs. And also plays a paternal role, meaning a fatherly role, in providing, remember that fathers provide again. So a paternal role in providing its economy with its basic and important needs. So therefore, a public sector or the state is a body that governs and regulates the functioning of its economy and also plays a paternal role in providing its economy with its basic and important needs. Now, the objectives of the public sector, remember that there are 5 and we use the acronym what? IFEPE, right? E for economic growth, F for full employment, E for economic equity, P for price stability, and then E for exchange rate, right? There are 5 objectives of the public sector. So let us start with the full employment. Okay, in terms of full employment, the first thing that we do, we explain, right? So full employment is a condition where all people who are looking for a job can find it, right? So when we talk about full employment, we are saying whoever is looking for a job can be able to get a job, in simple terms. And the government is always trying to attain high levels of employment in the country. They have to actually try to always to attain that, because remember that they need taxes, and taxes usually come from people's spending and also what? People's salaries, right? And then the current rate of unemployment is what? 33.9%. And then the employment increases due to contribution of the informal sector, right? So yes, the employment, right, the employment rate, right, increases due to the contribution of the informal sector. Why? Because in the informal sector, you do not necessarily need a qualification to be able to get a job there, right? So that's why this sector contributes a lot to the employment rate. And the rate of unemployment has increased in South Africa over the years, the rate of unemployment, right? So in terms of full employment, you need to talk about what it is. You need to talk about the government trying to attain high levels of it. You need to also talk about the current rate of unemployment, and you also need to talk about which sector contributes the most. And then lastly, you need to talk about whether it has increased over the years, right? So full employment is where anybody in that particular country who is looking for a job can find a job, right? We are saying the government is trying to get high levels of employment, and then the rate is the 3.9%. The employment rate has increased due to the informal sector, and then lastly, the rate of unemployment has increased in South Africa over the years. Okay, the next one is our economic growth. We know that economic growth goes hand in hand with real GDP, right? So the first thing that we need to define it, right? So we are saying economic growth is an increase in production of goods and services produced by a country in a specific period, right? So we are saying it is an increase in the production of goods and services produced by by a country in a specified period, right? Is an increase in production of goods and services produced by a country in a specified period. Economic growth, like I said, is measured in real GDP. For economic growth to occur, the economic growth rate must be higher than the population growth rate, right? So we are saying here, for us to say we have economic growth, right? Economic growth has to be higher than the population growth rate. Just because our population is growing, it doesn't mean there's more spending in the economy, there's more people who are getting a job. This might just mean there's just more people in the country, and therefore when there's just a lot of people in the country, the per capita real GDP will fall. So that's why the economic growth rate, right, for it to occur, economic growth has to be higher than population growth rate. So you talk about it's measured in real GDP, and lastly, for it to occur, what must happen? Then we have price stability, right? So here we're looking at our inflation, right? And you know that for us to measure inflation, not to measure inflation, for inflation to be controlled, the sub has to get in with the what? With the interest rates, right? So price stability. The sub has implemented a policy of keeping inflation within the targeting rate of 3 to 6%, the inflation bracket. Interest rates are the main instruments used to stabilize prices, right? Then we get to the next one, economic equity, right? So for economic equity, we are looking at the redistribution of what? Of wealth. The redistribution of wealth is essential in market economies, right? So since it is essential, right, the minute they talk about the redistribution, you should be thinking of the taxes, right? So remember that we are using a progressive income tax, right? So we are saying, okay, our South African government use a progressive tax system to redistribute income, like I said, right? So that's how income is redistributed. So taxes on profits, progressive income tax, tax on wealth are taxes used to finance free public services and social security grants, right? So the first thing that you need to talk about there, you need to talk about under economic equity, that the government redistributes it redistributes income, and the way in which it redistributes income is through progressive income tax, and also like taxes on profits, on income, also on wealth, right? They are used to finance the public services, right? And then you get to the last one, which is our exchange rate stability, right? So the government manages the economy through effective fiscal and monetary policies to stabilize the country's exchange rate, right? So for us to have an exchange rate stability, you need to talk about the government, right? That it uses the fiscal and the monetary policy to be able to stabilize or manage the country's exchange rate. You also need to talk about the depreciation and the appreciation of the currency, that it could create uncertainties for currency and should be limited, right? So they need to limit the depreciation and the appreciation of currency. And then we know that the SA government uses a free floating system. Remember, a free floating system, the changes in currency is determined by the forces of demand and supply.